Good evening, everybody. Thank you. How is everybody tonight? Good. Well, thank you for coming out this evening. I really appreciate everybody's turnout. This is a great turnout for our first event here this year. So my name is Daryl Sherman. I'm the co-founder and CEO of the Canadian Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce. This year, CGLCC celebrates 15 years. I feel old now. Older, yeah. And one of the ways that we are marking that celebration is with our new Thought Leadership series. So this evening is the first in a series of events that we'll be holding throughout the year to really challenge the way that we approach business and to push ourselves, our businesses, our communities to think smarter, to be bolder, and to do better. CGLCC is dedicated to providing all stakeholders with access to current and relevant information that supports the growth of their businesses and the Canadian economy. Through our Thought Leadership series, CGLCC is helping our stakeholders consider new ways to approach business. So I'm very excited about today's session, the competitive advantage of a diverse and inclusive culture for modern business. I sometimes feel that diversity and inclusion is a concept that is talked about and expected within organizations, but is too often looked at in silos or maybe not even stray beyond the walls of the HR department. So tonight we're going to take a look at how companies of any size can implement a cross-enterprise strategy that ensures diversity and inclusion are fully integrated within the organization and that this is supported by the culture of the organization. So on the panel, we'll hear from the internal workplace perspective, from the community and marketplace perspective, as well as from the supplier perspective. The supplier perspective is often overlooked, but can and should play an important role in any company's diversity and inclusion strategy. This is a key area of focus for the Chamber. With our supplier diversity program, we're working to support diverse-owned businesses, specifically LGBT-owned businesses, and help to connect them with our corporate partners and ultimately into their supply chain. So tonight would not be possible without the amazing support of our partners, RBC. Thank you for hosting us here tonight. Telus and Prompted Consulting Group. It's now my pleasure to introduce Lawrence Spicer, Vice President, Internal Audit at RBC and Executive Chair for RBC Pride Canada, to provide a few remarks on behalf of RBC. And as he makes his way up here, we're going to do a short little video from RBC.
I feel after that plays I should be like popping up from the stage or something, you know, like a rock concert. Anyways, good evening and welcome. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm very excited, and I'm always excited when we get a room full of really smart people together with a shared vision and a common purpose. I remember the first time I saw the RBC Purpose video. It was about 2 years ago when Dave Mackay launched our RBC Collective Ambition, our vision and guide for moving forward with this exact video. And while I've been with RBC for, gosh, almost 30 years, and for those of you that are doing the math, I started when I was 12, so carry on. And I've been in many different roles in banking, both domestically and internationally, and certainly now in internal audit. I've been an RBCer all those years because I believe in what we're doing. But for me, the video put into context a feeling that I'd not really thought about before, our collective optimism about the future. And at the core, we have a belief that people can achieve their potential and things can get better. It's quite frankly why we defined our purpose to help clients thrive and communities prosper. At RBC, diversity and inclusion is more than just a core value. It's actually in our DNA. Diversity is also an engine for innovation. Diversity of thought and perspectives come when we find the best talent across all demographics, regardless of gender, sexual orientation, age, or heritage. And inclusion is about taking deliberate actions to harness the richness of our ideas, our backgrounds, our perspectives, to help these clients and your clients thrive and our communities to prosper. Last year, RBC was recognized as one of Canada's best diversity employers for 2017, and we also received an Employment Equity Achievement Award from the Government of Canada, largely because we believe in breaking down barriers and helping our people achieve their full potential. Beyond our workforce, RBC has made a commitment to supplier diversity in our Diversity and Inclusion Blueprint 2020. By providing equal access to qualified, diverse suppliers, we enhance the levels of quality, service, and overall value to our organization and our clients. Like many other organizations in this room today, RBC takes steps to build a truly inclusive supply chain where diverse suppliers can better compete for business, which is what we all want. These are important steps to support and drive diversity and inclusion in our business community. I'm very pleased, as I said at the outset, to represent RBC here for the first event for the Canadian Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce Thought Leadership Series. Through these dialogues, I hope we will inspire meaningful change in corporate Canada so that we can all be optimistic about building a better future together. These are competitive times, as we know, in Canada, and future prosperity is depending upon it. It's now my pleasure to introduce Maddie Baker, Director of Procurement, IT, and Global Services at Telus, who will share their diversity and inclusion journey. And I want to thank you and enjoy the evening. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having us here today. I'm from Telus and within the procurement function. And within Telus, we really seek to be considered a leader in diversity and inclusion, and we truly believe that different perspectives, experiences, and ways of thinking enables us to spark innovation, to achieve our business strategy, and truly put our customers first. There is a really important link to supplier diversity as well within this journey, and we, particularly in procurement, truly believe that we will give an improved and innovative customer experience if we have a supply base that really truly reflects the diversity of where we live, work, and serve. And it's really part of our commitment and passion within Telus as much as it is within RBC. So thank you for having us here today, and enjoy the evening.
Thank you, Lawrence and Maddie, for your remarks and for your support, of course, this evening. So it's now my pleasure to welcome to the stage our panelists for this evening's discussion. So first, we have Elizabeth Asida, Supplier Diversity Manager, Sodexo; Maddie Baker, Director of Procurement, IT, and Global Services, Telus; Kimberly Messer, Business Development Executive, North America Workforce Diversity and LGBT Markets, IBM; Karuba Sankar, Director, CSR, Global Procurement, RBC; and Gabby Zuniga. Oh, so close. Zuniga. We practiced this. I failed, clearly. Inclusiveness and flexibility leader, EY. And our moderator for the evening, sorry, Tim. Tim Morton, managing partner, Prompted Consulting Group.
Bright lights. Oh, sorry guys. So what a video. What an incredible video. And from the video, the key takeaway for me was seeing the word disrupt and disruptor. And hopefully tonight, everybody that's here thinks of themselves as a disruptor. There's a lot we can do from a supplier diversity perspective. There's a lot we can do from a diversity and inclusion perspective. And so often over the last few years, there's been events that are focused on one or the other. And tonight we're bringing them together. And we're talking about this holistic vision of diversity and inclusion. And it's more than HR, and it's more than procurement on the diversity side, the supplier diversity side. It's about this holistic view that looks internally at your workforce, in your workplace, but it looks externally at how you're working with suppliers, what you're doing with communities, what you're doing with your customers. And that's what this conversation is about. We need to challenge the status quo. There's a real thought out there from outside the world that Canada's leading from a diversity and inclusion perspective. And we know that from the inside, there's more that we can do. So just a few things for tonight. Let's have some fun. You've got a great group of panelists in front of you, and let's start to think about how we can disrupt, how we can start to build more diverse, more inclusive cultures, how we can start to look at diversity and inclusion both from the inside and externally. It's something we can live day to day. So with that, one of the things that we want to do is hear from each one of the panelists. And we're going to give them 60 seconds, up to 60 seconds, and we want to hear from them their macro view of what this holistic D&I approach is for their company. So we've heard from Maddie from Telus. So if we could start with Elizabeth, and we'll work our way down the panel.
Okay, it's gone. I was pressing the button instead of moving it up, sorry. Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening. Thank you to having me here today. Sodexo, wow. What does our D&I and supplier diversity look like? It looks like this room. It looks like great potential and abilities within our organization, but also externally. We work very hard to foster an inclusive internally and externally. I'm out there with my suppliers and encouraging them and speaking to them so they can also foster and align with our commitment, because our commitment is from head down, and we also want our suppliers to also align. And one quick example of what we're doing in the D&I space comes from a VP that I heard last week. She hired a new assistant, and for whatever reason, she was leaving for a couple of minutes to do something. And after a couple of times, she felt the need to ask, what is that? Is there a reason, there's a problem, there's an issue? And it come to know that there was a cultural need that needed to be addressed, and accommodation was in. So D&I is not only listening, it's also observing, and that's what Sodexo's D&I and supplier diversity is.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Just to help put the rest of the conversation in context for today, I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to share a little bit about IBM. So for those of you who are not aware, IBM has been around for 107 years. We just celebrated our 100th year in Canada last year, and we are approximately 400,000 employees operating in just about every country in the world. So as you can imagine, with that history, we've had a lot that we've learned along the way. We've had to transform not only from a technological perspective to stay relevant in the technical world, but also we've had to transform from a values and culture perspective. And again, what that has done for us is given us an incredible foundation to stand on. Every IBMer that joins the company understands what it means to be an IBMer, what our values are, and what we stand for. And I can tell you that permeates itself into all aspects of our day-to-day business, whether it's how we deal or work with our clients, how we operate in a global marketplace, how we create an inclusive workplace to attract, retain, and develop the world's best talent. But I would say most importantly, it's about innovation. I mean, we've been touting diversity of thought for close to a decade now. We are a company that relies on innovation. It sustains us, it pays us. If we're not innovating, we're not successful. So certainly that's a critical component to this conversation, is about diversity of thought. And I'll just say as well that, and this sort of leads into sort of follow-up conversation, diversity is not just about what's happening inside the walls of your company, it's also more and more about what you're doing outside the walls of your organization, and I'll look forward to touching on that shortly.
Yeah, I think at RBC, I'm very proud to say that we have a pretty strong D&I program. When I look at back, what's the success of this program was, the way in which the program was built, they kind of looked at it at, one of the three-dimensional view of the company's purpose, value, and vision. You clearly saw the purpose on the screen today, helping the clients thrive and the community prosper. And one of our core value is diversity and inclusion. And in our vision is to be among the most inclusive and successful companies putting diversity into action to help employees, clients, and communities. So at the core of this vision, the focus was on the three pillars: talent, client, and community. So when you're looking at the program, the way in which it is aligned between the purpose, vision, and value towards to the talent, client, and community, that was a kind of a real, I would say it's a mantra for the success.
Thank you. Gabby?
Hi. Okay, there. So at EY, we have been on this journey for over 30 years here in Canada. Our purpose as an organization is to build a better working world. Everything that we do, that D&I DNA is in it, both internally and externally. We're embedding it in all of our business processes. So internally, we look at the employee life cycle, and we've obviously touched upon the most obvious ones: recruiting, onboarding, but we're also looking at how people team, how people feel like they belong in the organization. So we're looking internally at the whole self that people bring, and externally, through our supplier diversity program, through the ties and through the connections we make with our community, with the organizations that we support, we ensure that we're also embedding it in those processes. So, we're extremely proud of the work that we've done, because it is part of the way that we're going to grow and continue to be the employer of choice for our people internally and also externally.
Great, thanks. Thanks, everybody. So one of the things I wanted to get across too is that we're going to open things up towards the end to audience, and there'll be a couple volunteers going around. So one of the things that I wanted to initially touch on is if we think about this enterprise holistic D&I approach, it allows companies, and we talked about this modern company, and the modern company allows people to bring their whole self to work. It allows people to be open and honest and creative and not check who they are at the door. And it allows all of that potential that is within your company and dormant within your company to come alive. Millennials are choosing now who and what they want to work with. And they want to work with companies that they don't have to check who they are when they go in the door. They want to work for companies that they can be proud of, and they can talk to their friends and family, over dinner or over drinks with. So the first question, Karuba, is how has RBC's culture and workforce directly benefited from your diversity and inclusion approach?
I think you look at RBC, the diversity and inclusion was kind of injected into the culture, and it's also part of our DNA as well. The way in which we work internally is we empower the employees to move forward. That the thinking behind, where we can innovate and how we could be a change leader. So the empowerment is towards the employee. So that's a key, view of making the culture to be there. And inclusion is like, giving the opportunity for people to raise and open up and talk about various things. So the good example is like, we have RBC Connect, which is our internal social media network. It's similar to the Facebook, where people will share their ideas and feedbacks. So that creates a momentum internally of what things to be done. In 2016, we had over 900,000 posting on the RBC Connect sites. So that creates a lot of change which is taking place. And if I really look at it, that's how the value which we're really looking at the diversity and inclusion is to bring innovation and the growth. So that's what I would say.
Thanks, Garuba. And over to Elizabeth. And Elizabeth, if we look at Sodexo's website, and I don't know if you've been there, but if you haven't had a chance to go to Sodexo's website, please don't do it now. But but later tonight or over the weekend, and it screams diversity and inclusion. You can tell it is part of the DNA as well. So, Elizabeth, for you, how does this impact your workforce and people bring their whole self to work?
Well, absolutely. As many has said it, I'll repeat it again. It's part of our DNA. We're working really hard, and I think it's not something we could ever say we're done. I don't think we'll ever accomplish done. When that will be, I don't know, but definitely we're always looking to improve. Our DNA is there, so our commitment is there, our strive is there. It's not just my vision, it's from head all the way, so from France. We're in 80 countries, and 80 countries have that commitment installed in them, that value. So we're definitely working each and every day to improve. We have 5 different resources centers that our employees can access to that touch every different areas of 6 dimensions actually, and as well as supplier diversity also touches that as well. And one great example I'm going to give to you as well, because I think that shows the benefit that it's going through is we have one of our resource centers is called Pride, and when we launched that resource Pride, we felt that most of the members were only allies, which is great. But we're wondering, where is the community? Why isn't the community participating? So we started investigating different areas, and we started actually putting different marks there to get more interest and understand why. So up to today, that has improved. Our 2016 last employee survey, diversity was number 2 of improvement and top 2 highest scores. So that means that we're doing what our employees are asking us, and we're also doing in the work of supplier diversity, because to see advancements, I've spoken to one of our suppliers. They're now in the US market, which they've tried many years, but through Sodexo, they have accomplished that. It's not overnight, so don't get me wrong, it's a work in progress. And that shows that D&I is very rooted in Sodexo.
Great, thank you, thanks. So when we talked, Elizabeth, one of the things you said was, I don't know if I'm making a difference, and I don't know if we're moving the dial. And for a lot of us, when we work with diversity and inclusion, and we sometimes get discouraged because we see all the things that aren't happening. And it's easy to get discouraged, but there are things that are happening, and there's a lot of great things that are happening. And one of the things about diversity and inclusion, it's a cultural transformation. And a cultural transformation is a journey. And it's a journey that's going to take every company a different amount of time to travel. And each company, because of their history, has their own journey to take. And it needs a vision, and it needs change champions, and it needs leaders, and it needs sponsors. So it's easy to get discouraged. And even if your company's program is just in its infancy or really struggling, hopefully from the conversations tonight, you're going to learn and you're going to hear a lot about how you can get your program going, how you can start the ball rolling and start to build some momentum. So with that being said, so thinking about this as a transformation and we're bringing a vision to life, Maddie, for you, what challenges has Telus faced with implementing your holistic D&I strategy, and how are we overcoming these challenges?
So I think firstly we have had some challenges, as any organisation would, but I also think that we've been very successful. So I think the main obstacle has been around being a large organisation, having the right communication, having the right connections in place. I think everybody's really trying to achieve the same goal, but sometimes within the organisation, even between procurement and our employee resource groups, we have to be having the right conversations to know that we're actually trying to do the same thing. But having robust policies in place makes a huge difference. And one of our 4 strategic pillars is really about setting the tone from the top. Externally, we really try and promote diversity through events that we sponsor and things that we support, including Pride. And I believe that last year within Telus, we supported more Pride events across Canada than ever before. And last February, actually, one of the things that I was hugely impressed by is when we were faced with a number of terrorist activities around the world, including in the UK and Canada, our CEO actually promoted the phrase "diversity is beautiful" across all the screens in our offices and outside of our buildings, not just in English, but in multiple languages, including Punjabi, Mandarin, Cantonese, French, Hindi, Arabic, and Hebrew, which I thought was very powerful for the organization. We have 6,000 team members that participate in our 6 employee resource groups that really celebrate diversity and inclusion. And I think that in order to combat that challenge, it's also recognizing the role that those groups can play individually, but also together. Within procurement, we really are trying to build our connections internally with the employee resource groups and others and small business teams. And we've actually seen a 35% increase in spend since 2014 with accredited vendors from CGLCC, CAMSI, and Weeby, which is a huge, huge achievement. And so within supplier diversity, we also just try and promote things internally and externally. Before I joined Telus 2 years ago, I used to work for GlaxoSmithKline in the UK and the US. And I was responsible for, or my team was responsible for supplier diversity in the US. And in the US, they had to have 12% of their spend with accredited diverse vendors. And it really was a huge part of just normal processes, normal practices within procurement. And if you started talking about supply diversity, everybody knew what you were talking about. So I've really seen the art of the possible, and I really believe that within Canada and within Telus we can get there. And so internally, you know, we include supply diversity on our scorecard. Our teams have a bonus that's partly based on how many diverse suppliers they invite to participate in events. We try and build relationships. We try to be visible as much as possible about what we're doing. And externally, supplier diversity has for a number of years been part of our diversity and inclusion report. We try and participate as much as possible in events such as this. We rewrote our supplier code of conduct last year, and for the first time, we have a reference to supplier diversity and also to accessibility within the supplier code of conduct, basically saying that we expect our vendors to have the same perspective and position as us on supplier diversity. And we actively support organizations within Canada, including WEB, CGLCC, and CAMSI.
Great, thank you. And so with one of the things with Telus is we come to a lot of your Spectrum events here, and Adam, one of your co-chairs, is here. And one of the big changes that we've seen years ago, when there'd be Pride events, which was great, or coming together, it was very corporate. And one of the biggest things that we took away this year was you had drag queens, and you were welcoming the community. And it was so good to see executives introduce drag queens, and they were amazing. Really, they were absolutely outstanding. But it shows where we're coming, and it shows that journey. Because if you really think, it was okay to be gay if you fit a certain mold and didn't disrupt, and you looked like everybody else. But the fact that things are changing little by little, and the drag queens were awesome. So Adam, another pitch for the next one. So, all right, and Kimberly. So with IBM, how is what are some of the challenges? Of course, I'm asking as you're drinking water, but what are some of the challenges that IBM's facing with your holistic D&I strategy, and what are you and IBMers doing to overcome?
We have none, thank you. All right, so I'm leaning forward because I'm going to get really passionate about this topic. So I would say, this is not necessarily, I'll say, a specific challenge, but it's something I want to share with you because it's a different perspective, and I think it's something that your organizations need to be prepared for if you haven't already been thinking about this. And I know there's many multinational corporations in the room, and this certainly applies more so in a multinational context at the moment. But I kind of alluded to this in my opening remarks, and I wanted to touch on how you stand up for your values externally. When we talk about diversity and inclusion, we're very much, for the most part, focused on programs and initiatives and approaches and warm fuzzy things that happen within our organizations. And I see, based on the world that we're living in today, social and political factors that are forcing us to approach diversity and inclusion in a way that maybe we hadn't in the past. So I'll give you an example. So some of you may be familiar with a model that was released in a report, I think it's almost 2 years ago now, by Kenji Yoshino and Sylvie Ann Hewlett, who it's called Out in the World. And they talk about models of how corporations, I'll say, behave in the countries in which they operate. So the first model is when in Rome. So you can infer, right, if you're a business operating in India, that you're going to operate based on the local laws and customs and cultures. And then there's the embassy model, which again, we're all smart here. So embassy model being that within the walls of the company in that country, you will promote your corporate values, but outside the walls, you will, remain quiet and abide by local culture. And then of course, then you have the advocacy model, which I think ultimately most companies are aspiring to get to. Many of you would be on the journey. IBM would say that we are absolutely in the advocacy space. So that would mean that we are outside our walls, we are advocating for change in the countries in which we operate. My organization, Global Business Development team, works with over 40 LGBT for-profit, nonprofit organizations around the world. But what's interesting about that, and we've been doing that our team's been around for 16 years, is you work collaboratively. You're a partner. You're not imposing your values. You're working with the local non-for-profit organizations who are trying to advocate for change in a very appropriate way. But what we're seeing in the world today is that companies are being forced to take a very public stand about their values in a way that they never have before. What's your position on DACA? What's your position on Trump's travel ban? Did you sign marriage equality? Did you sign the amicus briefs against bathroom bills in Texas? Did you raise your hand to support marriage equality in Australia? I mean, these are legitimate questions that companies are being asked to answer publicly. And IBM, for all the wonderful things we've done, has never been very public about our position. And that has changed dramatically. And we all know what's happening south of the border. That has changed dramatically. And we took out full-page ads in 3 newspapers in Texas opposing the bathroom bills. That was unprecedented. We have never done that. We quietly go about trying to advocate for change, but we don't do it in a very public way. But we have 10,000 employees in Texas, right? So ultimately, at the end of the day, when you talk about diversity, inclusion, you talk about values, we stand up for our employees. We believe in equality, and when we feel the rights of our employees are being threatened or jeopardized, we stand up. And that represents a fundamental shift. And while I would say that we're talking about the Canadian context, this will be my longest answer, the rest will be shorter. 30 seconds on the next 2. But I think this is important because I spend a lot of time in the US, and I think in Canada we've been really sheltered from having to take a position as a corporate community on really anything. Like, let's be honest, Bill C, oh my God, 16, thank you. Really, did any of your companies sign anything saying that you were in support of that? We didn't. We weren't even asked to. I do think that we need to just be aware that this conversation is on the horizon, that we are not immune in Canada, and that at some point our rights may be under threat, and as companies, we are going to have to take public stands. So if this isn't something you or your organization have thought about, you have to think about it, because you have to be really clear on where you stand, because your employees will also question. And it's my last point, sorry, I was really into this. And I'm being very honest with you and transparent, right? We were criticized, for example, so 2016 there was more discriminatory legislation introduced in the US than the whole year previous, right, in the first 3 months. So companies, EYs and the Sodexos and the big multinationals, we don't respond to anything in 24 hours, right? And we were our policy and legal teams were under so much pressure, and it was unprecedented. There was no playbook for how to do this. So I will just tell you that, we obviously made a very vocal opposition to Texas, but we did nothing in Mississippi, right? There was discriminatory legislation happening, and they said, well, why are you? Well, it's about our employees, and at the end of the day, I'll leave you with this message: corporations are not human rights organizations, right? So it's a delicate, delicate dance. I could talk about this all day over gin and tonic, so thank you. All right.
Sorry. And the conversation will continue after. We've set aside some time. So Gabby, from an E&Y perspective, one of the first companies that I joined when I started my career consulting was E&Y. And like IBM and other consulting companies, things have come so far, and there's been a big transformation. When I first started, the executive that I reported to, he was my ex-partner's former camp counselor. So we had great conversations when the door was closed, but there was an understanding when the door was open, I was to go back in the closet. And that wouldn't be the case today. And we know that E&Y is a leader, and we see what you're doing. So from that perspective and the journey that you're on, what are some of the ways that E&Y employees are able to bring their whole self to work, able to really contribute, and share that with your clients?
So yes, I think we have a very nice talk track, and we have been in this space for a long time, and we have been doing so much. But we are on a journey, and we are not where we as an organization want to be. So obviously I'm on this panel, and we're going to share a lot of good stuff that we're doing, but there's still a long way to go. So we know that it matters so much to our clients that we have a workforce that is diverse and inclusive. So we have had many opportunities here in our Canadian marketplace where we have been told after work has been awarded that we won because we presented the most diverse teams. So we know that this matters, and that it helps us win in the market. So from a competitive advantage, we need to continue putting forward diverse teams. And that helps our people because it gives them incredible organizations to work for and to get incredible experiences. We also know, externally that matters to our clients. We also know from our surveys that we do and from talking to our employees when they join our organization that the number one reason why they join EY in Canada is because of our inclusive culture. So we know that this is important to them, and it helps us hire the best people and give them the best opportunity and experience. So we have loads of data. We have lots of dashboards. I can tell you exactly where the gaps are, where we see gaps in retention and engagement for all of our racialized groups. But sometimes that data hides what's really happening. And it's sometimes really hard to know at a very micro level, at the interaction level, whether these programs and everything that we're doing is actually working. But in this role, I'm constantly approached by both EY alumni, which are people that have left the firm. They want to come back because they've started a new job, and they come back and talk to me and people on our team about how do I get my new organization on the path, on this D&I journey. So when our people leave, they actually then realize how inclusive the organization actually was. So, so that's, obviously very important for us because we want people to have an incredible experience while they're with us and to take it with them. And we know anecdotally that is happening. So at the micro level, people are experiencing the firm as an inclusive environment. And we also hear from a lot of our clients, which are big organizations, they want us in the D&I role internally to come and talk to them and tell them what it is that we're doing, because they've heard of our brand, they've heard of the things that we're doing, and they want to learn from us. So there are so many benefits, both to our people internally and to the organizations that are our clients. And we call them actually gracious acts. It's a business development term. And myself, I go out often, maybe once or twice a week, to go talk to organizations about what our journey has been, just given our brand in the space.
Great, thank you. So if we switch to the external, so we're still looking at this holistic approach, and we've talked about internal, but it's so important that we also look at supplier diversity, and we look at corporate social responsibility as part of our overall diversity and inclusion strategy. There's so many benefits to doing that. There's benefits for a community, there's benefits for supplier, there's benefits for customers. And one of the things that we know is what gets measured gets done. So what gets measured gets done. So with that, Elizabeth, what specific external diversity and inclusion and supplier diversity related targets has Sodexo put in place? How are you measuring, and how are you reporting against those?
So for our D&I, we measure different areas as activities, engagement, feedback through surveys that we do. So we have a platform where employees can bring back feedback. So how do we improve that? When have we implemented those needs and wants as per our values and our commitment? So we look at all those structures in the D&I and put those into practice. One amazing thing that we've just saw this year with our D&I group, so all the dimensions come through once a year and bring back all their different intentions, what they're going to do throughout their year. And usually everybody will work on their own group. This year we've seen such an amazing energy where the Pride group, we're working with the SAGE group, which is our age group, ADEPT, which is our disability group, and we've all collaborated. It's not just one group. It's not just the Pride group. It's not just the ADEPT group, which is the disability group. It's a whole diversity group. And we thought that was so amazing because we have not seen that prior to that. So that tells you right there that there's a difference we're making. We're meeting the mark in our supplier diversity. Wow, this year, since we have aligned a lot closer with our North American partner offices, there has been more targets put in, metrics put in. Our leadership are highly accounted for diversity and inclusion and supplier diversity engagement. It's a sizable percentage there, and it goes down to way below. I'm also have targets to put in there as an employee, not just as a supplier diversity manager, but as an employee too. So there's just tons of matrix which helps us to improve. Like I said before, will this ever get done? I don't know, but definitely it helps us to move the needle forward.
Yeah, and it really is step by step, and a lot of progress being made. So Karuba, for RBC, how are you moving things forward? How are you measuring? How are you looking at what you're doing from year to year?
I think exactly what you said. You know, what gets measured gets done. That's a principle we have in RBC as well. But the way in which it's done in RBC, it's done from the top level. So we have DLC, which is Diversity Leadership Council. So the way in which the Leadership Council has created this DLCs, it's in every business area. It is not just in D&I and HR. Mm-hmm. So the DLC is chaired by our president and CEO. Yeah. So under him, there are multiple DLCs from different business units reported.
Great. Yeah.
And everyone has, the DLC sets the targets and goals related to the D&I in every area. So HR, if you look at from the HR has its own scorecard and metrics to track and follow on the resource, in terms of how many hires is happening, promotion happening, how much departure is happening, and all this stuff they kind of report on a quarterly basis. So that sits on the, the D&I team under the DLC of that area. Similarly, when I talk about procurement, in procurement, we have, our own metrics is there towards the supply diversity. The way in which at the procurement, in supply diversity, when we launched this program many, many years back, it was more as a kind of a responsibility towards the social, so they kind of put the program in place. But then when the DLC started to look at it, they started to ask about, okay, the metrics of that.
Yeah.
So then we kind of built a program with the specific metrics in it and wanted to ensure that how we achieve towards the goal. So my global head of procurement on a quarterly basis tracks, supply diversity dashboard.
Yeah.
And I track the spend towards the diverse suppliers. And also we look at it from different views of how the diversification is happening on the spend. And we also track on opportunities. It's not just only the spend. We're looking at how many opportunities we are creating on our sourcing process, and that gets tracked and that gets reported. Similarly, we have the spend and how the year-over-year growth is happening on the supplier spend as well.
Great.
So these are the kind of metrics the management puts in, and then it gets all the way down to everyone to follow it on it.
Yeah.
And overall, the DLC, what they do is also they want to be transparent. They have published 3 reports on our rbc.com site. It's open for public.
Great.
We have one is called Diversity and Inclusion Blueprint 2020, which has all the values and goals and what we are achieving on.
Great.
And there's an employment equity report, and then the corporate citizenship report. So the 3 reports are available online,
Yeah.
Which is more transparent, which shows the leadership commitment, what's there on the D&I area.
Yeah, and from a leadership perspective, if you don't have leaders involved supporting and driving cultural change, it's really hard to get traction. You can be pulling and you can be doing everything you can, but without that leadership support, that consistent guiding sponsorship, it's really hard to move things forward. So, Maddie, for Telus, are you doing a lot of the same things from a measurement perspective?
Yeah, I think there's lots of things that we're doing within Telus that are quite similar. I mentioned already that we have 4 strategic pillars around diversity and inclusion, and we do have a diversity and inclusion steering committee. And those 4 pillars are around setting the tone from the top, so strong leadership and leaders as champions, which we were just talking about, really growing a diverse pipeline of talent, and making sure that that's represented at all levels in the organisation, embracing diverse viewpoints, and one of the things actually within my team we were looking at today is our pulse check results, which is a survey we do twice a year. Some things that's really important is the score around I feel my voice is heard, I feel that Telus really truly represents and encourages diversity of thought, diverse perspectives, etc. And finally, 4th, is around amplifying our business, which in my mind is where supplier diversity comes in. So similar to Karuba, we have within our procurement scorecards targets around how much spend we have with accredited diverse vendors, the percentage of events or sourcing activities that we're encouraging vendors to participate in. Last year we had over 20 different procurement team members, which is over 25% of our organisation that participated actively in a diversity event, which is fantastic. And within Canada, we really want to be seen as a leader. So obviously, external accreditation and awards are an important part of that, and it's great winning them, but retaining them is obviously also a continual challenge. And around some of the objectives within Canada, like diverse representation at board level, Telus was very proud in 2015 that we had 45% of board directors that were diverse, including 27% female. And we really want to lead by example. So over the last 16 years, we've donated more than $16.5 million to diversity causes. And one of the big things that the leaders really promoted in 2017 was around hours of giving. So Telus has a big... I guess they really promote giving where you live, voluntary activity and supporting local causes and local activities. And last year, the CEO set the company the target of volunteering 1 million hours. And we actually exceeded the target. So across the Telus employee base in 2017, we donated more than 1 million hours of our time. And for every hour that you donate, Telus donates $1 to the cause of your choice. So I personally, the hours that I donated, at the end of the year, I could then choose to, pay it forward and further support the organisations that I cared about. So there's a variety of different targets from the D&I steering committee to the targets we have in procurement, but also very visible targets around what I as an employee and everybody else can do day to day, that if you add all of that together, it makes a huge impact.
Yeah, and companies are choosing, and so are your customers. They're going to make choices based on what you're doing from a diversity and inclusion perspective. And that's internal and external. So, just our last question. Again, we talked about folks around the world seeing Canada as this beacon above the U.S. right now, and a beacon in the world. And are we? And are we doing enough? And it's good for us to challenge each other, but not to get discouraged. And when we think about supplier diversity, we're 40 years behind the U.S. They had a huge head start, but are we catching up? It should be streamlined. And so many times when we go to organizations that have supplier diversity programs and we talk to employees, they have no clue that they have a program. And it's because they haven't been tied. Diversity and inclusion hasn't looked to what we're doing with supplier diversity as part of that cultural change. And it is changing, but it's part of that journey. So, Gabby, for E&Y, what are the things that E&Y doing within your program to really challenge and progress Canada on a global stage when it comes to diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, so I completely, I laugh every time I hear how Canada is doing so amazing on a global stage because, we have less women on boards than India, right? So we have an angel complex. There's only 30 million of us here, and there's 300 million in the US. So of course, we're not seeing the same kind of violence and brutality, but we are nowhere where we need to be. So that question I just get all, ugh. Because there is so much that still Canada needs to do, and our Prime Minister, a lot is talk and good posturing with very little substance. And I'll add to that, this new maternity leave for women. Like when you really think deeply about, is that really helping women? What would have helped would have been giving parental leave to the father, right? Not to extend it for the women. So there is a lot that Canada has to do, and I think shedding this complex that we are doing so much is a start. I think we need to disrupt D&I. A lot of organizations we've all been doing a lot of the same things. There's a lot of programs, and we're not seeing the movement. So I think we need, like every other area and other industry and other occupations, we need to really think fresh about what would a diverse organization and society actually look like, right? Like what is the end game? So really asking bold questions and having the courage to do things differently, I think is what Canada and what EY and D&I practitioners, all of us, needs to do. So we, as an example of something that we're doing, is we've partnered with an academic at McMaster University who is doing a lot of incredible work on neuroscience and the brain, and he's trying to work with us in building an environment where our environment forces people to be more diverse and not leaving it to people. We all have unconscious biases. How are we going to act on those unconscious biases if they're unconscious, right? So he is doing a lot of work in trying to integrate and embed infrastructure so that we don't leave it to the individual. Because at the individual level, we haven't seen the progress that we've wanted. So that's one small way that we're trying to think differently and pull in some amazing research that is being done and try and use it in our organization.
Great. Thank you. And
Can I just add
yep.
one thing related to the, you talked about supplier diversity way behind in Canada. Just in, probably I think not this December, previous December, 2016 December, 3 councils, CAMC, WB Canada, and CGLCC, along with 3 banks, RBC, TD, and BMO. We 6 of us were there in Parliament Hill, showcasing the benefits of supplier diversity and how its economic impact create. It turned their eyes to see 3 councils and 3 banks together coming and giving the message to them, is able to create a reaction from them to look at the program and trying to work on how to inject that program into their procurement process as well.
Indeed.
So I think things are happening. Yeah, we know we are behind, but we need to take steps to make it forward. And working with, in the competition, we have 3 banks working together, 3 councils working together, shows that one voice where we can win on.
And with that, there's tremendous progress that we're starting to see. We're starting to see some press releases from the federal government. We're starting to see the provincial governments come on board, and we're also seeing different municipalities following the City of Toronto's lead. So progress is happening. It is so. Kimberly.
I used up all my time on the last question. So
Okay, we'll give you
20 seconds. Okay. Everything Gabby said. So yes, we don't do enough in Canada, but I guess if I were to highlight, one thing, an observation, because again, I'm fortunate or unfortunate, depending on how you look at it. I spend a lot of time in the States. That, nobody knows we're here. Like, we never do I go to a conference and when they're talking about, oh, let's look around the world at all the advances in LGBT inclusion, nobody ever talks about Canada. I'm like, hello, I'm from Canada. We actually been doing that for a long time. So I think we need to tell our story. We need to tell our story on the world stage. Yes, there's still lots to do here. But I think we do need to get out, even as companies, many of you that are based in Canada, I think you need to get out on the stage and talk about what the great things you're doing. And then also tell our stories within our own organizations. We started something called Pride Profiles at IBM. We do it for women and other constituency groups as well. But again, it's just showing that personal story of individuals in your organization, because we all know that the greatest change happens, when you can change hearts and minds, right? When people understand that personal connection of that coworker that has a gay son or daughter or a transgendered son or daughter, that you build those connections. So tell our story out in the world and tell our story within our own workplaces to help promote what's happening here in Canada.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we've got some time for Q&A. There's a couple volunteers. Is there? Okay, we got a couple volunteers. So all we'd ask is that if you could stand up, introduce yourself, and if you've got a specific question for a specific panelist, by all means, or you can open it to anyone on the panel.
Hello, my name is Behnaz. I'm a change manager and really focusing on cultural shift, a member of Fronto team. So I lived and worked in 4 continents, like from Middle East to Far East to Europe and now North America. Having this in mind, and then what you said in terms of bias, unconscious bias, I find it hard to work in a diverse teams also. So not to mention that it's hard to tell that somebody is listening to you but interpret what you say as something else. Or like somebody tells me something that is offensive. So all these confliction when you want to compose a team will happen if it's diverse. I work in the very male-dominated workplace and female-dominated workplace, and sometimes I'm really, to be honest, frustrated to work in a female-dominated workplace. Sorry to say that, right? So having this, having a disruptive question, I have this question. So how you educate people to work in the very granular and individual level to work in the diverse workplace, let's say diverse culture workplace, or yeah, that's my question, because it's hard. So how did you so far tackle that? Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll jump in since nobody's really excited about that one. We call it, I guess at IBM, when you were asking your question, what came to mind for me was cultural competence. So we have training internally that's called cultural competence, and I would say that stemmed, back, I don't know, I've been at IBM a long time, 18 years, when we started to offshore a lot of our jobs. So I was working in software development for 15 years, and our team was all over the world. I was working with developers in China and India, and so this notion of cultural competence really came into play because you were working with diverse cultures from all over the world. Of course, that's true just working on a team, in Toronto, right? That you've got diverse cultures represented. So I think it's important for an organization to have, and I'm going to say training, and nobody likes the word, but it's all part of the unconscious bias. It's part of cultural competence, because we have to understand what, how to operate in this world and coexist in a meaningful and productive way that is ultimately contributing to the greatest success for your team and for the organization that you're working with. It behooves your organization to ensure that that's happening, because if it isn't, then you're not achieving your full potential, you're feeling uncomfortable, there's all those negative things that happen.
Great question. We've got one in the back.
I do, actually, if I can figure out how to turn. Oh, there we go. My name is Dave Acko from a company called COSIS in Montreal. My question is regarding social media, citizen journalism, and being accountable. If you look at the Me Too movement and all the rest of that stuff, in terms of being able to put your own word out there in terms of holding companies accountable. We haven't seen it yet, but I'm predicting it eventually will be on a horizon where one group will basically say that another company is not being responsible, and the accessibility of social media making that possible. Have you guys considered, it's just, how would you address that? Because I don't think it would be simply just pointing at a policy and saying, well, we're addressing it, or giving a number, because now social media is allowing an individual to really call out a company or an organization.
So at Sodexo, we sometimes are faced with social media, and there is an escalation and a model that is accounted for. Our social platform is monitored regularly to address those issues and find a resolution.
So you're talking about internal or external? Oh, both, okay. Because, man, just don't take a look sometimes at your own internal social media. That can be, don't do that. That's what I say. Don't do that. But same rules apply, right? I mean, internally, we have two employees in Poland who are just known by every gay person at IBM, who just, no matter what we post, no matter what we do, they go off in various ways. Never really violating any particular policy, but HR has talked to them a few times about the culture, and but it's a for sure a real issue, and certainly from an external perspective, IBM is very careful about what you're saying in terms of everything I've said here tonight is off the record. No, but they make you in your Twitter thing say, this is my own personal opinion, not the opinion of IBM, and I'm sure other companies have similar policies like that.
Okay, we've got time for one more question. Katie, it's your call.
Hi, my name is Janice Griffin, and I'm within a charity called Student Unity Project. And I hear tonight many labels: LGBT, new immigrants, disabled. In the organization that I'm proud to be associated with, we don't have labels. We just have one label, and that is friend. So our organization trains and hires kids to support other kids in their schools that are being bullied. So you had mentioned that you'd like to work more with the community, and I'd like to ask each and every one of you, what contributions do you make to support your communities in their efforts for inclusion? Thank you.
So who'd like to take this one?
Okay, they're looking at me, so I guess it's me. We do a couple of contributions. We are actually doing a lot internally with bullying. So we bring out awareness what it means internally and dedicate one day to the whole Canada-wide, as well as we also participate in something called Feeding Our Future, which is throughout the months of July and August. That helps the community gets involved, as well as our supplier partners get involved. What else do we do? There's a couple of other organizations that doesn't come to mind, but those are the two top ones that come to mind right now.
And I think from a Telus perspective, I've already talked a bit about community engagement. There's obviously lots of small and large community organisations that we support, either as individuals or as an organisation. And the only other thing that I wanted to mention briefly is we also try and use the services and products that we provide as a platform to support local communities. So if you think about cyberbullying, internet security, we try and use what we do as an organisation and try and also come up with I guess innovative products and communication methods to try and support those causes and provide materials and resources, so families, for example, can make sure that they're confident that their children are accessing information that they should be on the internet, as an example. So there's lots of things like that we're involved in at Telus as well.
Great. Okay. Thanks everybody, and thanks to the panelists. We're just scratching the surface here tonight, and again, it is a journey, and there's lots more conversation to be had, and starting to think of D&I just not as something that HR does, that we all play a part in, and it's reflected in everything we do internally and externally as well. So a big thank you to everyone, and I'm going to hand it over to Daryl.
So thank you, everybody, for being on the panel. That was a great dialogue, great conversation happening. I think Tim hit it on the head there, where he said that, it's really the tip of the iceberg. Let's just kind of scratch the surface on the conversation. And so I hope that everybody here will at least take home a little piece of insight, and hopefully are challenged when you go back to your companies, back to your organizations. And not to put everybody on the spot, but I'm sure that these people are clearly passionate about what they do. And so I would encourage you to find them after this and pick their brains, because they have a wealth of information that they would like to share. I know Kimberly would. So thank you, panelists, and thank you, Tim, for moderating. And thank you again to our sponsors who made this evening possible, RBC and Telus. Both of these organizations have been with the Chamber for a very long time, and both are actually founding partners of our Supplier Diversity Program. We appreciate your ongoing support, and thank you to the volunteers that were here helping us out today, our entire team here at the beautiful RBC Water Park Place Auditorium. Thank you very much. Jeff, for all your support, and to the catering company that provided that amazing food, which is still lots out there, so 2 more seconds. I want to thank our team at CGLCC. So we have Katie at the back there. Thank you, Katie. She is the manager of Supplier Diversity Program, so if anybody is interested in learning a little bit more about the Supplier Diversity Program, please talk to Katie. I also want to give a shout out to our board members that are here with us today. We have Bruce McDonald, Zach Penley, and Bill Pallett, and I think maybe Al was with us, but maybe Al's left. At the start, I talked about some of the exciting things that we're doing at the organization. I want to quickly mention one other program that we launched late last year, which is our LGBTQ Youth Entrepreneur Program. And this is really where we're supporting young entrepreneurs either to start or grow their own business. And these are really the faces of our future business community. And we want to ensure that they are set up for success. I believe we have, I think Andrew's in the room, was in the room. So he's one of our young entrepreneurs, and his mentor is here as well, Lawrence. I'm very proud of this program and encourage any of you that might be interested in learning a little bit more about this youth program to talk to any of the team or the board members. We also have some other great events lined up for 2018, so please watch out for those. We'll be coming up with those shortly. But to make sure you put this on your calendar is our Global Business Summit, which will be held in June 13th to the 14th, so put that on your calendars. So again, thank you to our panelists. Thank you all for attending this evening. The bar is still open, the food is still out there, so enjoy your evening, and thank you.